The sand was red. Not the natural red of iron-rich soil, but the dark red of old blood that had soaked into the ground over centuries. Commander Sarah Vance felt it shift under her boots as she walked into the center of the arena, and she understood exactly what kind of place this was. 40,000 Corvathi filled the seats above her. They were tall creatures, almost 7 feet on average, with skin like gray leather and eyes that glowed soft yellow in the artificial light. They had come from across the sector to watch the games. They had come to see blood. Today, they expected to see hers. The roar of the crowd hit Syrah like a physical force. It was not a sound of anger or hate. It was worse than that. It was the sound of amusement. They were laughing at her. To them, she was nothing more than a brief entertainment before the real fights began. 3 weeks ago, Syrah had been the commander of a diplomatic vessel. She had been carrying trade proposals and cultural exchange documents. Her mission was peace. Then the Corvathi intercepted her ship at the edge of their space. They said she had crossed into restricted territory. They said she was a spy. The truth did not matter to them. What mattered was that they had captured a human, and humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. The Corvathi Dominion was old and proud. They had conquered dozens of species. Their arena was famous across 100 star systems. For 500 years, their champions had remained undefeated against all challengers. The arena was more than entertainment. It was proof of Corvathi superiority. It was their temple, and the blood of lesser species was their offering. Now, Sarah stood in the center of that temple. Alone, the High Arbiter sat in a viewing platform high above the arena floor. He was ancient even by Corvathi standards, his gray skin wrinkled and spotted with age. Golden chains hung from his neck, and his robes were the deep purple of royalty. When he raised one thin hand, the crowd fell silent. His voice boomed across the arena, amplified by hidden speakers. It was a voice used to absolute obedience. It was a voice that had sentenced thousands to death in this very place. "Today we witness a rare gift," the High Arbiter announced. "A human. A creature from a small world on the far edge of known space. They call themselves explorers and diplomats. They speak of peace and trade. But today, this human will learn what the Corvathi have always known. The galaxy belongs to the strong. The weak exist only to serve or to die." The crowd cheered. Syrah said nothing. She simply stood there, her hands loose at her sides, watching everything. The High Arbiter continued. "We are not without mercy. The human will be given a weapon. Let no one say the Dominion does not give its prey a fighting chance." A gate opened on the far side of the arena. A Corvathi guard walked out carrying a curved blade on a velvet cushion. He approached Syrah with obvious disgust, as if being near her was an insult. He dropped the cushion at her feet and retreated quickly. Syrah looked at the blade. It was beautiful in its way. The handle was wrapped in expensive leather. The metal had been polished until it shone like silver, but she could see the truth of it. The edge was dull. The balance was wrong. It was a ceremonial weapon made for show. It was meant to give hope without giving any real chance of survival. She picked it up anyway. She tested its weight, turning it in her hands. The crowd watched with the casual interest of spectators who already knew the ending. Then another gate opened. The creature that emerged was nothing like the Corvathi in the stands. It was a Velcresh, a species bred specifically for combat. The Corvathi had conquered them generations ago and kept the strongest as arena fighters. This one was their champion. His name was Thorax, and he was a nightmare made flesh. He stood 9 feet tall. His body was covered in black exoskeleton that gleamed like polished armor. He had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. Along his spine, rows of venomous spines stood erect, glistening with poison. His eyes were solid black, like pools of oil, and they fixed on Sarah with the cold hunger of a predator. 300 kills. That was his record. 300 warriors from across the galaxy had faced him in this arena. All 300 were dead. Thorax walked slowly toward the center of the arena. He was in no hurry. He never was. Part of his legend was how he played with his prey, how he made the killing last. The crowd loved him for it. He stopped 10 meters from Sarah. Up close, he was even more terrifying. She could smell him now, a sharp chemical smell like burning metal. She could hear the click of his claws as he flexed them. Thorax spread all 4 arms wide. It was his signature pose, an invitation and an insult at the same time. He was telling her to attack, telling her that he would not even bother to defend himself. He was showing the crowd that she was not worthy of his full attention. The crowd roared their approval. They chanted his name. The sound echoed off the arena walls like thunder. Sarah looked at Thorax. She looked at the blade in her hand. She looked up at the 40,000 spectators who had come to watch her die. And then Commander Sarah Vance did something no one expected. She dropped the blade. It clattered against the bloody sand, spinning once before coming to rest. The sound was small, but in the sudden silence that followed, it might as well have been an explosion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crowd began to laugh. They thought she had given up. They thought she was surrendering, begging for a quick death. Some of them stood and pointed at her, mocking. Others made crude gestures. The sound of their laughter filled the arena. Thorax tilted his head, confused. In 300 fights, no one had ever willingly disarmed themselves. He did not understand what she was doing, but he decided it did not matter. Prey was prey, armed or not. He took a step toward her. Sarah did not move. She did not back away. She did not cry out or beg. She simply stood there, watching him approach with eyes that held no fear. And in that moment, though no one in the arena understood it yet, everything had already changed. The crowd was still laughing. They would not be laughing for long. The Kovathi Empire had files on every species they encountered. They were careful that way. Before they conquered a world, they studied it. Before they went to war, they knew their enemy. Information was power, and the Kovathi had been collecting information for a very long time. Their file on humanity was thin. It described humans as a young species from a small planet called Earth. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Their bodies were soft and fragile. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no special abilities of any kind. They could not see in the dark like the Kovathi. They could not run as fast as the Volkresh. They could not survive in vacuum or extreme cold or extreme heat. On paper, humans were one of the weakest species in the known galaxy. The file noted that humans were social creatures who preferred diplomacy to war. They smiled a lot. They talked about peace and cooperation. They seemed genuinely interested in making friends with other species. The Kovathi found this amusing. In their experience, species that talked about peace were usually just too weak to fight. The threat assessment at the bottom of the file was simple, negligible, but the file was missing some things. Important things. Things that might have changed the threat assessment completely if anyone had bothered to include them. The file did not mention that humans came from a planet that actively tried to kill them. Earth was a world of extremes. Burning deserts, frozen wastelands, oceans full of predators, jungles full of poison, natural disasters that could destroy entire cities. And yet humans had not just survived on this death world. They had thrived. They had spread to every corner of it. The file did not mention that humans had spent millions of years as both predator and prey. They learned to hunt. They learned to hide. They learned to work together in groups, to communicate across distances, to plan ahead. They learned patience. A human could track an animal for days, never stopping, never resting, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. This was called persistence hunting. No other species in the galaxy had developed it. The file did not mention what humans did when they ran out of natural weapons. They made their own. They shaped stone into blades. They carved wood into spears. They discovered fire and used it to reshape the world. They built tools, then machines, then computers, then starships. Each generation built on the work of the generation before. They never stopped improving. They never stopped learning. The file did not mention the wars. Humans had fought each other since the beginning of their history. They had invented 1,000 different ways to kill. They had destroyed entire cities. They had split the atom and created weapons that could burn continents. They had done all of this to each other, to their own kind. And through it all, they had kept smiling. They had kept talking about peace. The Kovathi saw a soft, friendly species that preferred diplomacy. They did not see the predator hiding behind the smile. Syrah Vance knew all of this. Of course. She had grown up in the aftermath of the Jakarta collapse, one of the worst urban disasters in human history. When she was 14 years old, she had killed a man twice her size with her bare hands. He had been part of a gang trying to raid her family's shelter. She had been protecting her younger brother. She did what she had to do. She never talked about it. But she never forgot it either. After that, she had joined the military. She trained in close combat, in weapons, in tactics. She learned every way a human body could hurt, and every way it could be hurt. She became very good at both. But she discovered that she was even better at something else. She was good at reading people. She was good at understanding how they thought, what they wanted, what they feared. She was good at finding common ground. So she transferred to the diplomatic corps. For 6 years, she had traveled the galaxy, meeting new species, learning their languages and customs, building bridges between worlds. She was good at her job. She made friends everywhere she went, but she never forgot how to fight. She just preferred not to. During her years in the diplomatic corps, Syrah had made a point of studying every species she might encounter. She learned their histories, their cultures, their biology. She was especially interested in the Velcresh. The Velcresh were impressive creatures, strong, fast, deadly. Their exoskeleton could stop most blade weapons. Their venom could kill in seconds. They were everything the Kovathi file said they were, but they had weaknesses too. Everyone had weaknesses. You just had to know where to look. Syrah knew that Velcresh had a cluster of nerve endings behind their third thoracic plate. A hard strike to that spot would cause temporary paralysis in their lower arms. She knew that their joints were designed for forward motion and could not handle sideways pressure. She knew that their eyes were excellent at tracking fast movement but had trouble following slow, subtle motion. She knew that their respiratory system was vulnerable, with exposed spiracles along their sides. She knew exactly how to take one apart. Thorax did not know any of this. He saw what everyone saw when they looked at Syrah. A small, soft creature with no armor and no claws. A human who had just dropped her only weapon. Easy prey. He was making the same mistake the Kovathi had made. The same mistake every species made when they first encountered humans. He was judging by appearance. He was seeing what he expected to see. He was not seeing the millions of years of evolution behind those calm eyes. He was not seeing the endless wars that had shaped her species. He was not seeing the girl who had survived the Jakarta collapse. Syrah watched him approach. She watched how he moved, how he shifted his weight, where he kept his center of balance. She was reading him like a book. She had been reading him since he walked into the arena. the crowd was still laughing. They thought the fight was already over. They thought she had given up. They did not understand. Humans never gave up. It was not in their nature. Even when they were beaten, even when they were dying, they kept fighting. They kept looking for a way to win. Sarah had already found hers. Thorax was 3 meters away now. He was moving slowly, enjoying the moment. His claws clicked together in anticipation. The crowd chanted his name. 2 meters, 1 meter. Sarah could see herself, reflected in his black eyes, small, soft, helpless. Thorax reached for her dot, and Sarah moved. What happened next took exactly 14 seconds. But to those who witnessed it, those 14 seconds would stretch into forever. They would replay the moment in their minds for years to come. They would describe it to their children and their children's children. And no matter how many times they told the story, they would never quite capture what it felt like to watch the impossible happen. In the first second, Thorax reached for Sarah with his upper right arm. It was a casual grab, the way one might pick up a small animal. He expected her to cower. He expected her to freeze. Instead, she stepped to her left. It was not a large movement, just a small shift of her weight, a few inches to the side. But it was enough. His claw closed on empty air. Thorax was confused. His eyes were designed to track fast movement. Running prey, jumping prey, panicking prey. He was used to creatures that fled in terror. But Sarah had not fled. She had moved slowly, deliberately, just enough to avoid his grasp. His eyes had barely registered it. In the second, third, and fourth seconds, Sarah was already behind him. While Thorax was still processing his miss, she had slipped around his massive body like water flowing around a stone. She knew he would need at least a second to turn his bulk. She used that second. Her elbow drove into the soft spot behind his third thoracic plate. She hit it with perfect precision, her entire body weight behind the strike. The nerve cluster there was not protected by his exoskeleton. It was one of the few vulnerable spots on his body, and she hit it exactly right. The effect was immediate. Both of Thorax's lower arms went limp. They dropped to his sides like dead weight. He felt nothing below his middle torso. For the first time in 300 fights, he felt pain. Real pain. The kind that could not be ignored. He tried to turn. He tried to face her. But she was faster. In the 5th second, Thorax spun to his left, his upper arm slashing through the air. His claws could cut through metal. If they touched her, she would be dead. But she was not there. She had dropped low, below his swing, and her hands found his upper right wrist. Human hands were remarkable things. They had evolved to grip, to twist, to manipulate. They were one of nature's finest tools. And Sarah knew exactly how to use them. She gripped his wrist and twisted hard. Not forward, where his joint was strong. Sideways, where it was weak. The joint was not designed for that kind of pressure. There was a wet, cracking sound, like a tree branch breaking. Thorax's upper right arm bent in a direction it was never meant to go. His scream filled the arena. It was a sound the Corvati had never heard from their champion. A sound of genuine agony. A sound of fear. In the 6th, 7th, and 8th seconds, the crowd fell silent. The laughter stopped. The chanting stopped. 40,000 Corvati stared at the arena floor, unable to believe what they were seeing. Sarah used Thorax's broken arm as a lever. She pulled down and twisted, forcing the massive creature to his knees. He was 3 times her mass, 9 feet of muscle and armor, and she was controlling him like a puppet. He tried to resist, but his lower arms were still paralyzed. He only had one working arm left, and she was staying on his blind side, using his own body as a shield. In the 9th second, Thorax tried to stand. He pushed up with his legs, using his remaining arm for balance. For a moment, It seemed like he might break free. But Sierra had been waiting for this. Her palm struck his remaining upper arm at the joint. It was a precise hit, delivered with perfect timing. The joint dislocated with an audible pop. Thorax screamed again. He collapsed back to his knees, all four arms now useless. He was helpless. The greatest champion the arena had ever known was kneeling in the bloody sand, completely helpless. And a small human woman was standing behind him in the 10th and 11th seconds. Thorax tried one last time to fight back. He threw his body backward, trying to crush her under his weight. It was a desperate move, the action of a creature that had no other options. But Sierra was no longer behind him. She had slipped to the side the moment he moved. And as he fell backward into empty space, she stepped forward. Her heel came down on the primary spiracle along his right side. The spiracle was how he breathed. It was soft and exposed, and the heel of a combat boot was hard. He collapsed face first into the sand, wheezing and gasping. He could not move his arms. He could barely breathe. The fight was over. In the 12th and 13th seconds, silence filled the arena. It was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of something very close to fear. 40,000 Corvathi looked at the small creature standing over their broken champion. They looked at her soft skin, her strange flat face, her tiny hands. They looked at her and tried to understand what they had just seen. She had not used a weapon. She had dropped her weapon. And then, in less time than it took to draw a breath, she had destroyed a Velcresh warrior. In the 14th second, Sarah Vance looked up. She looked past Thorax's broken body, past the stunned guards at the arena gates, past the silent crowd. She looked directly at the High Arbiter's platform. The High Arbiter was standing. His ancient face was frozen in an expression no one had ever seen before. Fear. The visual feed from the arena was being broadcast across 74 Kovathi worlds. 900 billion citizens were watching. They had tuned in to see a human die. Instead, they were seeing something else. They were seeing their undefeated champion lying in the sand, wheezing through a crushed airway, all four arms hanging useless. Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm and clear. She spoke in perfect Kovathi, without accent, without hesitation. Every word was picked up by the arena microphones and broadcast to every screen in the Dominion. Who's next? No one answered. No one moved. The great Kovathi arena, which had seen 500 years of combat and death, had never been so quiet. The silence lasted for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then the exodus began. It started in the front rows, closest to the arena floor. These were the wealthy Kovathi, the nobles and merchants who paid premium prices for the best seats. They had come to watch violence from a safe distance. Now they were calculating that distance with new eyes. The barrier between the stands and the arena floor was 3 meters high. It was made of reinforced glass, rated to stop a charging Velcresh. It had never been breached. It had never needed to be breached. But the wealthy patrons in the front rows looked at that barrier. And then they looked at the human standing over the broken champion. And they remembered something they had read in the human file. Something about persistence. Something about patience. Something about a species that never stopped coming. Suddenly, 3 meters did not seem like enough. The first to move was a fat merchant in golden robes. He stood up from his seat and began pushing toward the exit. He did not say anything. He did not look at anyone. He just moved. Others followed. At first it was just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The exits were not designed for this. They were designed for an orderly departure after the games ended. They could not handle a flood of bodies all pushing at once. People began to shove. People began to shout. Within minutes, the wealthy section had become a riot of elbowing bodies trying to escape. The panic spread upward through the stands. Those in the higher sections could not see why people were running, but they could hear the screaming. They could feel the fear spreading like a disease. And they ran too. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Something quieter but far more dangerous. The Kovathi had communication networks built into their arena seats. Small screens where patrons could look up information, place bets, chat with friends. Now those screens were lighting up with searches. Everyone was suddenly very interested in humans. They found the official file first. Fragile, weak, negligible threat. The same file that had been so wrong. But they also found other things. Things that had been buried in obscure databases, dismissed as exaggeration or propaganda. Someone found a historical document about human persistence hunting. About how ancient humans would chase an animal for days without stopping, without sleeping, until the animal died of exhaustion. No other predator in the galaxy hunted like this. Most predators attacked fast and hard. If the prey escaped, they gave up. But humans never gave up. They just kept coming. Someone else found records of human wars. Not the sanitized diplomatic summaries, but the real histories. The trenches of their First World War, where millions died fighting over a few miles of mud. The atomic bombs of their Second World War, where they vaporized entire cities in an instant. The countless smaller wars since then, where they had refined the art of killing to terrifying precision. Someone found a video archive of something called mixed martial arts. They watched humans fight each other for sport. They watched humans break each other's bones, strangle each other unconscious, beat each other bloody. They watched humans do this for entertainment while other humans cheered. The searches multiplied. The information spread. And with each new discovery, the fear grew. Did you know? One Kovathi messaged another that humans domesticated wolves? They took one of the most dangerous predators on their planet and convinced it to live with them. They did this thousands of years before they had technology. They did it with patience and cleverness. Did you know? Came the reply that humans are pursuit predators? They are not the fastest creatures on their planet. They are not the strongest. But they never stop. They never tire. They will follow you until you drop. Did you know that humans smile when they are happy, but also when they are angry? They show their teeth either way. You cannot tell what they are thinking. You cannot tell what they are planning. The arena was emptying fast now. The High Arbiter's platform had been the first to clear. The ancient ruler had been carried away by his guards, moving faster than anyone had seen him move in decades. He understood what this meant for his reign. An undefeated arena was a symbol of Kovathi power. That symbol had just been destroyed on live broadcast, in front of the entire Dominion. The guards at the arena gates were supposed to maintain order. They were supposed to keep the crowd calm and direct them to the exits. Instead, they were running with everyone else. Some had dropped their weapons. Some had not even bothered to pick them up. Zero watched all of this from the center of the arena. She had not moved since ending the fight. She just stood there, hands at her sides, watching the chaos unfold around her. Thorax was still lying at her feet, breathing but not moving. Medical drones had been dispatched to help him, but they were having trouble getting through the fleeing crowd. She felt no satisfaction in what she had done. Thorax had not been her enemy. He had been a slave, a conquered creature forced to fight for his master's entertainment. In another life, in different circumstances, they might have been allies, but she also felt no regret. She had done what needed to be done. She had survived. More than that, she had sent a message. When the arena was nearly empty, Syrah finally moved. She walked toward the main gate, stepping over the ceremonial blade she had dropped earlier. Her boots crunched on the bloody sand. The few remaining spectators pressed themselves against the walls as she passed, their yellow eyes wide with terror. She reached the security station near the main exit. Inside, she found 3 guards huddled in a corner. They were young, barely adults by Korvathi standards. They looked at her with the expressions of creatures who had just seen their understanding of the universe shattered. Sarah spoke to them in Korvathi. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "My name is Commander Sarah Vance of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I was illegally detained 3 weeks ago. I would like my personal belongings returned. My diplomatic credentials, my communication device, my identification." The guards did not move. They seemed frozen, unable to process what was happening. Sarah waited. She had learned long ago that patience was usually more effective than force. Finally, one of the guards moved. He was shaking as he walked to a storage locker and retrieved a small bag. He held it out to her with both hands, arms fully extended, as if afraid to get too close. Sarah took the bag and checked its contents. Everything was there. Her diplomatic badge, her comm unit, her personal effects. "Thank you," she said. She meant it. Politeness cost nothing, and these guards had not been responsible for her imprisonment. She walked out of the security station, through the main gate, and into the streets of the Korvathi capital. Behind her, the arena sat nearly empty, its legendary reputation destroyed in 14 seconds. Ahead of her lay the spaceport, her ship, and a long journey home. But Sarah knew the journey was not really ending. It was just beginning. What had happened in the arena would spread across the galaxy. It would change everything. Humans had just announced themselves in a way the galaxy would never forget. The broadcast had been seen by 900 billion Korvathi citizens before the government censors could react. By the time they tried to suppress it, copies had already spread to neighboring star systems. Within hours, it had reached the wider galactic network. Within days, it had been viewed by trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The footage was simple. A small human woman stands in an arena. A massive Velcresh champion approaches her. She drops her weapon. The crowd laughs. And then, in 14 seconds, she destroys him with her bare hands. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. On the Korvathi homeworld, the aftermath was chaos. The High Arbiter was facing calls for his resignation. The arena, which had been the symbol of Korvathi dominance for 500 years, became a symbol of something else entirely. Citizens refused to attend fights. The remaining champions requested transfers to other duties. Within a month, the great arena was closed indefinitely. The Korvathi Intelligence Service launched a massive investigation. How had they missed this? How had their files been so wrong? They began collecting new data on humans, real data this time. What they found terrified them. They learned that humans had not one but dozens of martial arts, each developed over centuries of practice. They learned that human soldiers trained for years to fight in ways that no Korvathi had ever imagined. They learned that the woman in the arena, Sarah Vance, was not considered exceptional by human standards. She was a diplomat, not a warrior. If a diplomat could do this, what could their actual soldiers do? 3 standard weeks after the arena incident, the Korvathi Dominion released all human prisoners. There were 47 of them scattered across various detention facilities. They were returned to Terran space with formal apologies and generous compensation. The Korvathi ambassador personally delivered a message, expressing deep regret for the misunderstanding that no one believed the apology was sincere. Everyone understood that the Korvathi were afraid, but the ripples did not stop at the Korvathi border. On a dozen other worlds, governments began quietly revising their assessments of humanity. Species that had dismissed humans as weak and harmless now looked at them with new eyes. The Velcresh themselves, those who remained free of Korvathi control, sent a formal greeting to Earth. It was the first contact between their species. The message was simple: respect, Trade negotiations that had been stalled for years suddenly moved forward. Species that had refused to take humans seriously now returned to the bargaining table with different attitudes. Humanity found itself with new allies, new opportunities, new standing in galactic politics. But there was a darker side to the ripple as well. Some species looked at the arena footage and saw a threat, not a potential ally. They began building weapons, strengthening defenses, making plans for a war that might never come. Others tried to hire human fighters, hoping to use them as weapons against their enemies. Humans became valuable and dangerous at the same time. Commander Sarah Vance returned to Earth as a hero. She received a medal from the Terran Council, a promotion to full admiral rank, and more interview requests than she could count in a lifetime. She declined most of them. She had never wanted to be famous. She had only wanted to survive. The messages came from everywhere. 716 in the first week alone. Some were threats from species who saw humans as enemies. Some were offers of alliance from species who wanted protection. Some were proposals of marriage from individuals who found human lethality attractive. Some were requests for training from warriors who wanted to learn how she had done it. Sarah read each message carefully. She responded to a few, mostly the threats. Her responses were polite but clear. Humans did not seek conflict. But if conflict was forced upon them, they would finish it. One message came from a Velcresh elder, a leader among the free clans. He asked a simple question: "Why did you spare Thorax?" Sarah thought about her answer for a long time. Finally, she wrote back, "He was not my enemy. He was a prisoner, like me. I did what I needed to do to survive." Nothing more done. The elder's response came quickly. "This is why we respect you. You have the power to destroy, but you choose when to use it. This is the mark of a true warrior." Sarah saved that message. Of all the reactions to what she had done, it was the one that meant the most to her. Months passed. The galaxy slowly adjusted to its new understanding of humanity. The arena footage became required viewing in military academies across dozens of worlds. Analysts studied every second, trying to understand what had happened. How had she moved so precisely? How had she known exactly where to strike? How had a creature so small and soft defeated a creature so large and armored? The answers, when they came, were more disturbing than the footage itself. She had known because humans studied their enemies. They collected information. They found weaknesses. They planned. She had moved so precisely because humans trained for this. They'd practiced the same movements thousands of times until they became automatic. They turned their bodies into weapons through sheer repetition. She had won because humans never stopped fighting. Even unarmed, even outmatched, even facing certain death, they looked for a way to win. And they usually found one. The galaxy learned a new phrase. It entered the diplomatic vocabulary of 100 species. It was whispered in councils and conferences and secret meetings. Do not mistake human courtesy for human weakness. On the Korvathi homeworld, the great arena sat empty. Maintenance drones still cleaned the sand. Repair crews still fixed the barriers that had been damaged in the evacuation. But no crowds came. No champions fought. The glory of 500 years had been erased in 14 seconds. In the center of the arena floor, a ceremonial blade still lay where it had fallen. No one wanted to touch it. It had become a symbol of something. A warning. Humans preferred peace. They smiled and talked about cooperation. They built bridges instead of walls. They reached out with open hands, but the blade remained there. A reminder that open hands could close into fists. And when they did, the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of. Sarah Vance returned to her diplomatic work. She continued building bridges, making connections, fostering peace. She smiled. She was polite. She was everything the galaxy expected a human diplomat to be. But sometimes, in meetings with other species, she would notice something new. A hesitation in their voices, a careful respect in their eyes, a small step backward when she moved toward them. They had seen the footage. They knew what she could do, and they never quite forgot that behind the smile, behind the diplomacy, behind the soft skin and the friendly words, there was something else, something that had survived a death world, something that never stopped fighting, something human.